I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Justin Goldstein.
I think that content and media will play off each other and go hand in hand for the foreseeable future, because clearly when it comes to paid media, there's going to be an increasing need for original content that's going to amplify their own channels. And there's going to be a need for organizations and individuals like solopreneurs to be able to really develop content that not only feels like the right fit topically, but also is geared towards the audience that they're trying to reach.
Justin Goldstein is an award-winning public relations and marketing expert and the founder and lead strategist of PR73, an integrated communications agency that helps build brand trust and unlock growth opportunities. He has reshaped industry practices through his work with leading organizations like Uber, AARP, Clinton Global Initiative, General Motors, and many more. Justin's mission? To empower brands to develop trust at every touchpoint. Justin's journey and personal story is a testament to the power of resilience and resourcefulness. My interview with Justin Goldstein is coming right up. But first...
This episode is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs has been committed to empowering investors with unexplored, intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in exchange-traded funds that offer exposure to the artificial intelligence ecosystem, including themes like data centers, robotics, semiconductors, and cloud computing. To learn more about Global X's entire suite of ETFs, from covered calls, fixed income, emerging markets, and more, visit globalxetfs.com.
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Justin Goldstein, welcome to On Brand.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, your bio had a follow-up to that idea of your journey and your personal story, but I didn't want to spoil it in the bio because, you know, a lot of people talk about kind of their hardscrabble background, how they got where they're at, but yours is really quite unique. I wonder if you'd share that story with us as we dive in.
Sure. You might be referencing the fact that I do have one kidney, and that experience has informed, I think, my time as an entrepreneur and a business builder, where, you know, I was born with a cyst on my other kidney and basically had it removed at birth. And so throughout my early years of life, especially where I was playing team sports, you know, gym classes, school, whatever it might be, I had to figure out ways to be resourceful and get around having one kidney to be able to take part in all those things, hang out with friends, whatever it might be. And so that really set me up, I think, subconsciously to be able to navigate difficult situations later in life, especially running a firm, and figuring out a way to find solutions quickly so that you can enjoy what you're doing and be productive at the same time.
I love that. And again, I think it is a neat way of kind of sharing your story, but also connecting in a very, very relevant way also. So in talking about kind of a clumsy segue alert, in talking about being resilient, it seems like it's a challenging time for brands and that resiliency is more required now than ever. In your work, helping organizations, several leading organizations, what have you found is key in helping brands to stand out and be resilient at a time when it's harder than ever to do just that?
It's an interesting question. I think, and your listeners may be aware of the Jaguar rebrand crisis that they experienced recently. And I think it actually goes back to the idea, it's a really good example that points back to the idea that sticking with the fundamentals of your brand and your business are really important to be resilient, right? So of course you want to be flexible and be able to change with the times and respond to how your audience is changing in terms of what they like and don't like and want in the future of your product. But at the same time, you don't want to necessarily change who you are, because ultimately you lose that brand identity and excuse me, have to start from scratch, which can be incredibly challenging, as Jaguar recently experienced. And as a car guy, I felt it myself, where when seeing their commercials, I think they got a lot of unwarranted backlash, but at the same time, the fact that, for example, there wasn't even a car in the ads that they were promoting. It's kind of like, well, where's the core of the brand, which is the automobile, right? And it felt like a pretty big departure from who they've been for the last 100+ years, which is a British, British iconic iconic British brand in the automobile space. And so, I think that goes back to, again, what I was saying, which is that, you really have to make sure that, yes, as you're pivoting and trying to find new ways to accommodate audience needs, you don't want to necessarily lose the soul of the business, because they're going to just leave you anyway. And that defeats the whole purpose of trying to be resilient.
That's a really good example, because I feel like, it's one of those things where there's, at the risk of kind of both sidesing the Jaguar piece of it, there were a lot of unforced errors on the brand side there. And I also think the other challenge is, I feel like both media and the modern consumer are a little more sophisticated when it comes to a rebrand. You can't just kind of put a new coat of paint on something and expect that to be kind of the magic beans that's going to capture and keep the attention. And if it's something that is just kind of I saw every meme of all of the luxury brands kind of doing their minimalist thing here over the past few years. And if it's just that, the crowd effect today is going to fill in that vacuum.
100%. Yeah. And you have to really be in tune with what your audience is saying, where, you don't want to lose the soul of your business, but at the same time, if you try something and A/B test something and it doesn't work and you get a pretty strong response to it, you have to adjust. And that might mean going back to the way that you were doing things before. I think for a brand like Jaguar, it's going to be kind of hard to get out of this one, because if you even look at their new electric car they're going to come out with in the next year or two, I believe it's a complete departure from what they normally do. And it's pretty in line with what the ads were, I think, pointing towards. So that's an example of where now that resiliency conversation changes to, well, now it feels like we have to stick with what we've done. How are we going to weather this and come out of it on the right side? So kind of just depends on the situation.
So let's stick with this for just a little bit longer. So if you were advising Jaguar on this, where do you get in front of this? I bet it's even earlier than we think, with just the kind of PR launch at the end of the shoot.
I think if I were in their shoes, I would find every opportunity that they can to have an in-person touch point with their customer base. So, for example, we have auto seasons has started, where I believe the LA Auto Show is kicked off, and then you'll have the New York Auto Show and subsequent shows happening, around Q2 and onward next year. So what I would do is I would bring the new car to all those auto shows, let people sit in it, feel it, touch it, and maybe they might go, oh, this actually isn't so bad. It's really cool, right? I think the more that you can do to showcase that customers are turning around once they see something and can feel it and touch it, and in this case, actually drive it, the more that you'll do to convince your hardcore audience that this is going in a direction that could work really well. Really good example of this actually is Porsche. Porsche, when they first came out with their SUV, it was a nightmare for them, because their core fan base was like, what do you mean you're coming out with an SUV? You have sports cars. That's it. That's the traditional Porsche. And over time, as people started to drive the car, they really felt like they were getting the sports car in an SUV all-weather format. And it became a hit. and it honestly saved the company because they weren't selling as well as they used to, the sports cars. So I think that, as much as they can do to get real feedback from their audiences, syndicate and brand that feedback as much as possible, the more that they're going to do to be able to turn this around.
That's such a good point too, because, and I love the Porsche example because it is, obviously parallel in a lot of ways, but it speaks to kind of at the risk of sounding condescending, some of the homework that really needs to be done before, to avoid okay, you just kind of did a new coat of paint. There's no car. It's not about anything here as well.
Absolutely. And, I think that Jaguar probably did do their homework and they just misread the room. I think that's what it came down to. I mean, also keep in mind that conversations around whether EVs are going to last or it's going to take even longer to really get auto buyers on board with EVs in a scalable way. That's really picked up over the last several months with the election, especially with potentially the EV tax credit going away. So you have to keep in mind that Jaguar has been following the industry standard conversation of automakers looking to ramp up their EV production to meet not only the demand, but the government requirements for EVs. And now all of a sudden you have companies like Ford that are scaling back their production. So they're kind of at the tail end of this saying, well, we've invested all this R&D into this car. We've done the research, both at the government and audience level, to find that there's a need for it. And now things are turning around. So I think that in reality, they probably were trying to read the room, and now it's just a completely different universe heading into 2025 that they'll have to adjust downward from.
That's such an important distinction to make too, because again, it's likely that so that they had material to go by, but misreading the room is kind of an easy thing to do if you're not careful.
On Brand will be right back after this. This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
The Subaru Share the Love event is a fulfilling way to get in a great vehicle and support a great cause. When you buy or lease a new Subaru from now until January 2nd, Subaru and its retailers will donate a minimum of $300 to charity. By the end of this year's event, Subaru will have donated nearly $320 million to charity. Visit Subaru.com/share to support a great cause today.
Now, back to the show.
So, as someone who teaches marketing and media, I talk a lot about, that classic business acronym of POEM, of paid, owned, earned media. And when we talk about content marketing, it seems that marketers today are a lot more comfortable talking about it from a content perspective. What's the relationship between content strategy and effective media relations?
I think that content and media will play off each other and go hand in hand for the foreseeable future, because clearly when it comes to paid media, there's going to be an increasing need for original content that's going to amplify their own channels. And there's going to be a need for organizations and individuals like solopreneurs to be able to really develop content that not only feels like the right fit topically, but also is geared towards the audience that they're trying to reach. Because ultimately, if you're paying for this material, you want to make sure that it's best equipped to be able to get you a new business lead, let's say, as much as possible. So I think having a conversation internally with teams or with individuals with themselves to really be able to figure out what they're trying to achieve with the content that they're developing is going to be incredibly important for paid media. I think it'll also be really important for earned. The difference with earned, though, is that reporters in particular, where a lot of the earned media goes towards, they want original content for what they're working on. Meaning, they don't want to see that a brand is, let's say, posting a blog post on what they want to talk about with the reporter before the reporter can write their story, because then they feel like they're not writing something original for their audience, the reporter. So I think that it's good to use the piece of content that you're working on as a starting point for what you will inevitably share with the reporter, but I wouldn't necessarily put it forward to be on your own channels before you let that earned reporter actually publish your insights on the topic.
That's such an important distinction in queuing that up as we look at planning in a new year ahead, and as you already hit the nail on the head earlier with talking about, even from the EV perspective, the some uncertainty. How do you see successful brands approaching? Any year has any new year, especially in marketing, for about the past 20 years, has had a great deal of uncertainty. But we've managed to, as you note, kick it up a notch a bit here with where things might be going. So, what do you think needs to be included in a media strategy moving forward to the year ahead?
To me, what's going to be really important for a media strategy is understanding between paid and earned how quickly you need to be able to generate a piece of coverage, right? And the reason I say that is because as newsrooms become smaller, which doesn't mean that there is an opportunity there, it just means that there's going to be more of a challenge to be able to break through and garner media coverage. It might mean a longer term turnaround for a piece of earned media coverage to pop up versus a piece of paid coverage where if you pay for it, you hopefully are able to just set the timelines and have that coverage go live very quickly. So I think when you're developing that strategy, you really have to determine, number one, what your timelines look like, because if you do have more of a longer term timeline, I would definitely weigh more of your work towards earned versus paid, and also taking a look at what the overall goal for your media strategy is. Meaning, if it's to develop leads, I actually think that the earned coverage works better, because oftentimes what you'll find with paid is that, at the top of an article, let's say it'll say sponsored or brand partner or something like that, where even a novice sometimes honestly can figure out that you paid for it and it wasn't necessarily something that you figured out on your own. And so it really comes down to what the end goals are, and then figuring out what kind of system you have on the back end to be able to leverage all of the media that you're securing. Because if you don't have a system in place to be able to say leverage a media placement across all of your social channels, your website, etc., then it often becomes a moot point, because that earned media coverage gets lost in the inability to think past the placement and be able to use it consistently. Especially if you're looking to generate a good amount of earned media, versus the paid media, where maybe you do one or two articles a quarter or every 6 months, whatever it might be, and it's a bit of a slower burn, and you're able to really leverage it because you don't have as much to work on at that point. So yeah, I think it really depends on the goals, but also taking a look at how well you're set up to be able to use the investment of time and potentially budget that you're putting into the media work that you're doing.
So you said the magic word there, budget. So when thinking about that big line item in the year ahead, what are most of us probably forgetting when it comes to an effective media budget in 2025?
I see more and more clients that are shifting budgets to social and paid media. It's not to say that earned isn't an incredibly valuable part of the media plan, and there isn't budget for it. But I do see more and more budgets going that way. I also see budgets going towards speaking and award opportunities, and all of these things are valuable. But I would, if I were talking to a client, I would advise them to say, are you really getting out of this what you anticipate throwing this budget towards? Meaning, for speaking opportunities, you might be spending a ton of budget to get opportunities that aren't necessarily going to have the audience there to connect with to build new leads from, right? And for the award opportunities, what we found is that, they are helpful. They definitely do help from a branding perspective and, potentially a business development perspective, but ultimately they're not necessarily a make or break for a lot of clients in winning new business. So I think it's really trying to figure out when you're putting this budget together where you see the most value coming from, of course, and what's going to get you to your goal quickest.
So, in thinking about the year that we are moving out of, as you think about what you've seen, we've already talked about Jaguar and the misstep there. Are there any other big lessons from 2024 that we can be reminded of to take into 2025?
I think one of the biggest lessons is that the media landscape is changing and that we need to redefine what a valuable media placement looks like, especially from the earn side. Because as you probably saw from the election right after, there was a ton of conversation around the value of podcasts and how they're arguably even more powerful and impactful than traditional media at this point. So, if you're an organization or an individual that's looking to get media, it's not necessarily about just getting the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. It's also about getting podcasts, Substack newsletters, et cetera, which are new, even satellite radio, which are newer mediums that have popped up over the last several years that provide incredible value, get strong audience listenership and reach, and arguably, I think, command more attention than traditional media these days. So I would just say the biggest lesson is to be open-minded and really consider new ways to reach audiences that may have seemed a bit lower tier or a waste of time in the past.
Such a valuable point and a great, again, lesson from not only the past year, but the election as well. Justin, what is a brand that has made you smile recently?
I would say Serhant. I'm not sure if you or your audience is familiar, but Serhant is one of the bigger real estate brokerages. It's based here in New York. It's run by Ryan Serhant, which is, of course, Serhant of the name. But yeah, I have been really, really impressed with their branding. Ryan himself is a master brand, just branding guy and personal brand, personal brand expert as well. Their work has just been amazing. I think that they're really leading the charge in terms of leveraging media to redefine the real estate space, where some of the older firms like a Douglas Elliman, they do a good job from their branding, but it's just not the level of what Serhant does, in my opinion. I would encourage anyone that's looking to learn quick branding techniques to, of course, listen to your podcast, but also check out what Ryan and his team are doing, because I've pulled many ideas for myself from the work that they're doing on their own. So I would definitely recommend checking them out.
Awesome. Such a great example. I love that question because I love learning about new brands. Justin, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Of course. Well, they can visit www.pr73.com. You can also find my LinkedIn page, Justin Goldstein, that's EIN and Goldstein. And you can feel free to email me directly at Justin, JUSTIN, at pr73.com, or the firm PR73 at info@pr73.com.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Justin Goldstein, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you for having me.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkis-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkisporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.